Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new content.
Episode 105. A New Hope. The stomach of the jungle leopard had been completely cut open by James's axe. Its guts and intestines were scattered on the ground. Blood flowed onto the rocks and into the stream, dyeing the water a milky red. Just like that, James had killed the massive leopard. Although the women didn't say anything, they were now certain that his background wasn't as simple as he had let on. In their hearts, he became in that instant even more perfect. Each of them thought they could rely on him anywhere and for anything, be it on a desolate island like this or back in civilization. But they couldn't get lost in idol worship too long. It was almost evening, and they had this dead leopard to deal with. James made a snap decision for them. They would take care of it tomorrow. Although the big cat probably weighed nearly 200 pounds, he draped it over his shoulders and hauled it back to the cave. In the eyes of the ladies, he was a real man. That night, they sat around the fire and watched Krista make pottery. The four of them chattered and laughed happily. Krista did not disappoint. She succeeded in making a variety of pots, vessels, and utensils under such crude conditions, including a pot, bowl, ladle, and water jug. Although the craftsmanship was not perfect given their situation, the items were practical and functional. This night, they used a clay pot to boil water. On the sixth night after they'd arrived on the island, everyone finally had hot water to drink. The soothing warm liquid felt like an incredible luxury. Hot water meant several things besides comfort. They could use it to make tea from the right plants, disinfect contaminated tools, and clean wounds. This way, their chances of falling ill were greatly reduced. Their sanctuary on the island was becoming more and more like a home. With that thought, James fell asleep with a content smile on his face. The weather was very good for the next few days. James did not venture far from the cave. Instead, he helped the ladies process the leopard's corpse. Most of the meat was smoked, dried, and cut into strips. It increased their food stores significantly. James made some rough calculations in his head. At present, even if he did not find any more food for a month, they would not go hungry. Even better, now that they had clay pots, their diet had improved greatly. They didn't have to eat roasted meat every day. Soup was also on the menu now. It wasn't exactly civilization, but for living in a cave on a deserted island, it wasn't bad. The next day, it began to rain. It came down so heavy that it prevented James from carrying out his next plan, to climb the mountain and get a look at the entire island. He thought that the rain would stop after a day or so. He did not expect it to last for 2 weeks. James slept comfortably in the cave under the soft, warm leopard skin they all took turns using as a blanket. But he was nagged by a single thought. They did not belong here. He still had to think of a way to bring these women back safely to modern civilization. Early one morning, James took stock of their dwindling food supply. The weather on the island was still not clear, but he decided to start moving. After eating a bowl of leopard meat soup that Katie prepared for him, he gathered up some things and got ready to leave the cave. His first goal was to get to the top of the mountain and check out the surrounding terrain. Then he would climb down to the shore and think of a way to get some seawater to make salt. He knew that their bodies lacked this necessary element. If this continued, it would severely affect their health. At the door to the cave, the women were reluctant to part with him. James grabbed the AK-47 leaning against the wall and handed it to Krista. "Take the gun," he said. "Protect Vanessa and Katie for me." "Don't worry, sir. I will," she replied. But she only agreed to his words. She did not take the gun from him. Instead, she pushed it back and said, "If you are entering the jungle, you will face more danger than us. Bring the gun with you." "She's right," Vanessa said. "Take the gun and come back safely." Katie added her piece. "Yes, James," she said. "We'll be protected in the cave. Just come back alive." He was pleased that they were so concerned for him, but he pushed the gun back to Krista. "Don't worry," he joked. "A fortune teller once told me that I'm a cat with 9 lives. and I've probably only used up 3 or 4 of them so far. Then he got serious. No more nonsense. You keep the gun and guard the house while I'm away. I'll be fine. James started to climb the mountain from the left side of the waterfall. He had scouted out a possible route a few days ago. There were trees and vines on the left that he could use as handholds to make his way up. It looked like it would be relatively easy. But the mountain was very steep. In addition, the constant rain made the rock, moss, and other vegetation especially slippery. Although he had great physical strength, it still took him almost 4 hours to reach the summit. Because it was raining, it was hard for James to estimate the time of day without the sun as a reference. He could only speculate that it was around noon. It was a rainy day, and there were many clouds surrounding the peak, but he was still able to see much of the surrounding landscape. There was a huge cliff at the bottom of the hill behind the waterfall, and a huge slope at the bottom of the cliff. The slope was connected to a large plain. He wondered if it was the same one he'd seen from the top of the tree he'd climbed for a look around after the bear incident. The plain was not too big. Its edge was connected to the sea. He could see a beach between the clouds and mist. It was much bigger than the one they'd landed on. The coastline was broken by a few rivers that flowed from the high ground into the sea. One of them was the stream that originated at their waterfall. There were no higher mountains around him. He felt that if his guess was correct, this mountain should be the highest one on the island. Just as he completed the thought, the long, silent voice of the system entered his mind. Congratulations on reaching your next mission location. You have obtained a set of special equipment. The map to the equipment has been sent to the storage space of the special item. Please take note of this. Then again, congratulations. You have successfully obtained the check-in. You have obtained 100% of the shares of the Masodero Hotel on Blaha Island. The next destination is the front desk of the Masodero Hotel. When James heard the notification from the system, his eyes lit up with indescribable hope. Blaha Island, he wondered. Isn't that off Madagascar? The implication was obvious. The system is continuing with the check-ins and has given me instructions. It has not given up on me. That means there is hope for us to leave this place. But rather than the assets of the Masodero Hotel, he needed to focus on the issue at hand. Let me see what this special equipment is all about first. After all, what he needed now on this island was to survive and get off it. Nothing else was important until he could accomplish that. James relied on his consciousness to enter the system's special storage space. A simple map appeared in his mind's eye. He used his thoughts again and the map appeared in his hand. Using the map, he quickly found a military-issued duffel bag in a crevice under a big rock not too far from where he stood. He reached in and took it out. It was quite heavy. James could not wait to open the bag and take a look. When he did, his expression changed from excitement to puzzlement and surprise. Episode 106. Unexpected Guests. When James opened the duffel, he found it was full of military supplies. There was a camouflage uniform, binoculars, a combat knife, guns, ammo, and grenades. He was dumbfounded. He could not figure out why the system had given him such things at this time. Could it be that it was going to turn him into a special forces soldier? Or would he become an assassin of some sort? Or was it because the system knew there was danger on this island besides wild animals, and it gave him these weapons so they could defend themselves? All these questions flashed through his mind, causing his thoughts to become muddled. He really did not understand this system. On the other hand, he had to admit that the equipment was special indeed. In their current state, having these items was better than not having them. First, it just so happened that he didn't have any clothes, other than the tattered rags he'd been wearing since they were marooned here. The uniform was exactly what he needed. And these guns and grenades increased their firepower exponentially. It would allow them to live a more secure and therefore carefree life on the island. James took inventory of the items in the duffel. It contained a Barrett M82 sniper rifle and 30 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition, a Beretta 92F pistol and 45 rounds of 9mm ammo, 5 M67 grenades, a Gerber Mark II combat knife, a set of military-issue M22 field binoculars, a Special Forces camouflage uniform, jungle pattern, a pair of military-issue combat boots. It was a complete kit, and it was all the best weapons and equipment in the world. But there was one thing conspicuously absent: a communication device. Otherwise, it really would have been everything a soldier needed to go to war. A half hour later, James was suited up. He looked like a professional Special Forces operator. He couldn't help but praise himself. "I'm simply too handsome." Actually, he'd had a dream of being a soldier ever since he was young, but he never had a chance to realize it. Now was his chance. James used the binoculars to look around. The military-grade optics increased his field of vision considerably. Right at that moment, the sky cleared of rain clouds and the sun peeked out for the first time in 2 weeks. James could not help but grin. My luck is getting better and better. He basked in the warm sunlight. Judging from the height of the sun in the sky, he guessed it was around 3 in the afternoon. It was too late for him to go all the way down to the beach to fetch seawater to make salt. Instead, since the weather was finally clear, he planned to go back to the jungle and get some fresh meat for their larder. Before, he had to be stingy with their bullets because they only had one gun and limited ammunition for it. But now it was different. He had plenty of ammo on hand for hunting. James sat on a flat rock at the top of the mountain. He was going to rest for a while before heading out to hunt. Suddenly, a series of staccato pops echoed in the distance. Gunshots? At first he wasn't sure. Then 2 more. Those are gunshots. It could only mean one thing. There were other people on the island. An indescribable joy flooded his body. At that moment, he felt as if he had reconnected with human society. James crushed the juice from some plant leaves and smeared it on his face as camouflage. The initial adrenaline rush had passed, and now he was thinking more clearly. Although he knew that someone else had come to the island, he still didn't know who they were. He had to be careful until he found it. He remembered that the island was located in the middle of the Indian Ocean between the Maldives and Mauritius. In this open area of the sea, Somali pirate activity had become rampant. He had to consider the possibility that he wasn't so lucky after all. He could tell from the sound of the gunshots that they came from an AK-47, but it wasn't theirs. The shots had come from the direction of the planes. James ran down the steep slope of the mountain until he came to a cliff. Fortunately, he had brought the nylon rope with him. He fixed one end securely to a tree and climbed down the heavily vegetated rock face. Soon he arrived at the slope below the cliff. At the far end were 2 low mountains. He estimated he should be able to see the entire shoreline once he reached the edge of the plain. There he could also easily hide himself until he determined whether their guests were friend or foe. James scrambled sideways from the top of the slope, heading toward the pair of smaller mountains in the distance. The wind had picked up considerably, and he could hear it whistling in his ears. The trees around him blew violently in the gusts. He was running extremely fast by this point. It was as if he had transformed into a leopard himself. It took only an hour to arrive at the 2 mountains by the sea. In fact, it was a high cliff overlooking the ocean. It was not 2 mountains after all. It was just that the elevation of this place was relatively high compared to the plain. At the bottom of the cliff was the endless Indian Ocean. The entire rock face was almost vertical to the surface of the water. There would be no climbing down this one. And it was just as James had hoped. From this location, he could see the entire coastline. It was a silver beach that stretched as far as the eye could see, shaped like a long, graceful bay. There were not many reefs on the shore. It was a good place to dock, much more so than where he and the others stumbled out of their lifeboat seemingly a lifetime ago. James took out the binoculars and looked into the bay. When he brought the view into focus, he was stunned. there was a yacht in the bay. But that was not the point. It was his yacht. He clenched his fists and cursed in his heart. I can't believe it. So it is the bad guys. This group was the reason why he, Vanessa, Katie, and Krista had ended up on a desolate island, living in a goddamn cave. His mind was crawling with hatred. Then he had a realization. I just obtained a bag full of military gear, and now I have these pirates back in my life. This is too much of a coincidence. He gave a grim smile as he peered through the binoculars. The system obviously wanted him to kill these cruel bastards. How had it put it earlier? He thought. Oh yeah, it would contribute to world peace. At the same time, he could take back possession of his luxury yacht and take the three beauties away from this godforsaken island and back to civilization. Then he could continue on to the next global check-in. Thinking about this, James was amazed how powerful the system was, as if it could predict the future. The things it gave him always had a special meaning. He began to study the situation aboard the yacht. It was anchored in deep water about 300 yards out to sea. The distance between him and the yacht was about 4,000 yards in a straight line. At this distance, he could not see the deck clearly with the binoculars. Lying on the ground, he took up the Barrett sniper rifle and trained its high-definition tactical scope on the scene below. Sure enough, the situation on the distant yacht appeared clearly in his vision. His body tensed up once again, because at this moment, he saw a familiar face on the deck. It was the dreadlocked pirate who had confronted him at the villa on Coney Island. He couldn't help laughing softly. "It's him," he whispered. This was unreal. It was as if he were performing in a movie. Episode 107. The hunting begins. The pirates seemed to be busy working on the deck of the yacht. They were moving boxes. The boxes were about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. He did not know what was inside, but judging from the way that the men carried them, they seemed to be quite heavy. The pirate with the dreads was standing at the edge of the deck, directing the others to move the boxes to the hydraulic platform at the stern. They were all respectful to him. It was obvious he was in charge. After they moved the boxes, they milled around near the platform, smoking cigarettes and talking. It was as if they were waiting for someone. And sure enough, a group of pirates emerged from the forest and tromped to the surf line. At the edge of the beach, there was an orange raft. They boarded it and rowed toward the yacht. When they arrived, the men on the deck began to move the heavy boxes to the raft. The boxes were indeed heavy. Once they were placed on the raft, it sat deep in the water. It looked like it was about to sink into the sea. James deduced that whatever was in the boxes were the things that these pirates had stolen on the high seas. Now they were trying to hide their booty on the island. He speculated that the boxes might contain precious metals such as gold or silver. The pirates all carried AK-47s. They looked vigilant and fierce. They could have been the fiercest pirates in the world, but still they had no idea they were being targeted by someone even more ferocious. James locked the sights of the sniper rifle onto the pirate with the dirty braids. If he fired now, the man's head would burst like a melon. But he eased off the trigger without firing. It would only alert the enemy, making it difficult to achieve his primary goal: taking back the yacht and leaving this island with Vanessa, Katie, and Krista. Revenge would have to wait. He had to have a plan. The best way forward, he thought, would be to lure the main force of pirates onto the island. After nightfall, he could sneak onto the yacht and settle everything. While James was thinking about his next moves, Mr. Dreadlocks, as he now thought of him, boarded the raft and went to the beach with the load of boxes. Obviously, he was afraid his subordinates would do something wrong. A smile crossed James's lips. "I was thinking about how to lure you onto the island a second ago. I didn't expect you to be on the island in the next second." He watched as the pirates disembarked and carried the boxes up the beach under the direction of Mr. Dreadlocks. James faded into the dense forest. "The hunt has officially begun," he said. The tropical forest was his world. He would let these pirates know what it felt like to be pursued by a god of death. Very soon they would regret ever stepping foot on this island. James moved extremely fast. Under cover of the bushes and trees, he quickly descended from the heights and made his way across the plain. He was heading towards the beach where the pirates had landed. If everything went smoothly, he would encounter them in 10 minutes at most as they made their way inland. 10 minutes later, he heard the sound of people passing through the forest. They were talking and laughing, unconcerned about threats. They relied on their numbers and powerful firearms to protect them. Besides, this was a deserted island. They never even considered the existence of a human threat. Even beasts in the forest would be no match for their high-powered weaponry. The only thing they worried about was accidentally stepping on a poisonous snake. Led by Mr. Dreadlocks, the pirates walked into the depths of the forest, heading straight for the slope at the bottom of the cliff. James followed them from a distance, undetected. He wanted to see where they would hide the boxes. Although they were a fairly long distance away, he could still hear their conversation clearly with his powerful hearing.
"Why did you guys fire your weapon earlier?"
Mr. Dreadlocks asked.
"Boss, a leopard suddenly appeared and pounced on us," one of them replied. "It caught us off guard. We had to shoot it to death."
The braided man just nodded and fell silent. About 10 minutes later, the group stopped at a huge rock in the jungle. Its bottom was hollowed out, forming a natural cave. James found a tall tree with a clear field of view and carefully climbed it. He fashioned a crude sniper hide among the branches, laid his Barrett sniper rifle across a sturdy branch for support, and began to monitor the pirates through the scope. Including Mr. Dreadlocks, there were 14 pirates in total. 4 of them were put on guard duty. The rest moved the boxes into the recess in the rock and covered the opening with leaves and branches. James's sniper hide was about 600 yards away from them. He could clearly see what they were doing through his optics. The tree he had positioned himself in wasn't a random choice. It was especially tall, providing him with a clear field of vision not only to the pirates on land, but to the situation on the yacht out at sea. Once all the boxes were stowed and covered, Mr. Dreadlocks led them back toward the beach. He left a handful of men behind, apparently to guard the contents of the cave. James waited for them to walk a bit before he commenced with his hunt. He locked the rifle sights onto his first target. "By the will of God, may this bullet wash away all of your sins," he muttered. He then made the sign of the cross in front of his chest. In fact, he was not a believer in Jesus, but he felt he had to do something to acknowledge the moment. This would be the first time he shot someone so calmly and deliberately. He took a deep breath, let out half of it, and slowly increased the pressure on the trigger. The gunshot shattered the silence of the forest. The scorching bullet whizzed out of the barrel, ripped through the dense foliage, and buried itself in Mr. Dreadlock's leg. The enormous inertia of the .50 caliber bullet instantly smashed the leg to pieces. Through the scope, James could clearly see the man's calf explode into a bloody mist, pieces of white bone scattered in all directions. The pirate leader collapsed to the ground. He covered what remained of his leg with both hands and let out a heart-wrenching wail. His men instantly scattered in all directions. The previously quiet forest boiled with shouting and frantic movement. "There's a sniper! I've been hit! Get down!" Although the pirates were ferocious by nature, their discipline was extremely poor. In the face of such a sudden attack, they were helpless, like a bunch of wingless flies. Although he took no pleasure in the killing, James did not show any mercy. He fired methodically, blowing off the heads of 3 pirates. Seeing the snow-white brain matter and blood explode in the air, he felt like vomiting. The shouting and chaos continued. It hurts so much. Everyone, don't move. There's a sniper in the forest. Damn it! Someone save me! Get down. Calm down, calm down. On this beautiful evening, pain, confusion, and fear resounded through the forest by the sea.